Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 1, Episode 5 of The Last of Us. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I thought it was really interesting that we found out that basically Kansas City has only been like this for 10 days because that's when the resistance took down Fedra in the city. And I think it probably maybe took them a day or two. And the brutality that was displayed at the beginning was gnarly. Like even seeing someone kind of being dragged by a car, they're full of like blades in their bodies. We're seeing people getting hanged, bludgeoned, and like stripped of everything they've got. You're like, wow, this is brutal. But then later on, I think even Henry calls the city, didn't he call it Killer City? Because, and even Joel's like, oh yeah, I heard that this city, the Fedra in this city he was like, oh, monsters? Yeah, they raped, torture, and killed people for like the past 20 years. The problem is when you do that, you build up enough anger and resentment that people are going to fight back. Yeah, the Fireflies are hardcore, but this is next level. This is a city that was beaten down and felt so helpless, and a resistance was surging, but it was only a matter of time before it fully bubbled over. Like this, we don't know, like, I think there's probably always issues between Fedra and any other city, but it seems like Kansas City, the fact is even Joel's like, yo, I've always heard about Kansas City, but it's like, yeah. So that is wild. But I also think, interestingly enough, I believe I should have looked into this, but I think the actor who plays Henry is the actor who played Kofi in Your Honor, and I'll just leave it at that. If you know Your Honor, you immediately, when I had that realization, you know what went through my mind. I was like, please, because I already know the story of Sam and Henry going into this, so I was like, oh my goodness. But I do like that they did change it by making Sam deaf. It's not something that I feel like gets used a lot in, yes, this is fungus, but still, once again, we'll still put it in the zombie category. That what I was going to say is like, because only ones I can think of is like The Walking Dead. That was the first time I'd ever seen like someone deaf in a zombie apocalypse situation, and that's the character Connie, and her sister Kelly like slowly starts losing her hearing later in the series. Kind of a spoiler, but not really. So that's what it immediately made me think of. But I was like, oh, that's such an interesting thing. And I do like how they handled that, the Henry stuff too. Kind of rewinding a little bit, showcasing the brutality of just like this resistance taking over and showing you how ruthless Kathleen can be, which once again, the parallels too, just because of like, once again, Melanie Linsky being scary is so cool. Like, once again, the parallel I always use is like Rose. Like, yes, Rose is an kind of a little disturbed character in 2.5 Men, but it's a comedy. And then you like seeing her, because I'm sure she's done darker projects but I'm not well versed in Melanie Linsky's filmography, but like, because I love Yellow Jackets and what she does in that show, once again, her and every actor in that show, top to bottom, like annihilates that show. They're so damn good. She's so damn good in it. And so that's why I was so excited finding out when I saw the teaser that she was in this. But regardless, the ruthlessness that she has, it's understandable when to her, it's like, collaborators, you are the worst scum in existence. Fedra's bad enough, but we expect them to be pieces of shit. You're bigger pieces of garbage because you collaborate with them. It's like, how does it feel? Like, to be in this situation, you sold out your neighbors for what? For medicine. The fact that she used that example specifically, and that kind of comes back around, I doubt Henry's the only one who did it, but we find out that Henry sold out people, specifically her brother, because we don't know if, it doesn't seem like he sold anyone else out, and that we're aware of. It seems because he was the grand prize. He was the magnum opus of turn people to turn in. So, because it was because Sam has leukemia and Henry needed medicine, and there's very little of the medicine, and what little was in existence, Fedra had. So you're almost like, dang, it does make you wonder, because we still don't know what Frank had, so we don't know, and you would have had to go through Fedra if there was anything that could help. But even he was like, yeah, there was probably no medicine in 2003 that had any type of cure for whatever it was that he might have had, so. But either way, circling back, Kathleen's brutalness of like, right, give me information. It's like, right, I won't kill you. You'll be put on trial. And obviously we won't have to like mince words. You're all guilty because you all collaborated. So, but you will get a fair trial. We won't kill you. And it's like, all right, well, you won't give me information on where Henry is. And then the name they gave, and she's like, wait, he's a collaborator? She's like, well, he did a better job of hiding it than you fucking idiots. And then later on, it's like, are we really going to put them on trial? She's like, no, kill every one of them, burn the body. So the burnt body pile we saw, that was most likely them. And once again, adding this context of what we saw last episode. And once again, giving us the backstory of understanding fully. Now it also makes sense why she was even more so willing to kill that doctor. Because who knows how many people he sold out. But also it's like, you are working with Henry, the person I hate and despise the most. So I love I love that feeling from this episode, and also understanding why Sam's got the marker on his face, because we know he was like obsessed with like superheroes. That's even a thing in a video game. Like he would play with like action figures and stuff, but like his brother kind of painting his eyes like a hero, you know. And it's that once again that's a common theme in this universe, is obviously like, you know, and obviously they shifted Bill's situation to be more of a protective situation, obviously him and Frank, but obviously it's like Joel and Ellie, Bill and Frank, Sam, Henry and Sam. And so, they ran out of food because the doctor never came back, which immediately Henry was like, because Sam was like, did they kill him? And Henry's like, yeah, the fact is he didn't come back. He probably is dead, which we know he is. So, they ended up, well, before they could leave the house that they were like hiding out at, that's when everything with Joel and Ellie, when they came to the KC, ended up going down. So he saw what Joel could do. So it seems like Henry isn't like the fighter. Like because I think the show does a really good job of elaborating on like, because we didn't really know that much about Sam and Henry other than like they're brothers and that Henry would do whatever thing he can to protect his brother. I don't really remember them going to any dialogue. Like, even the fact is Sam being sick, I don't think they went into that at all. Once again, I definitely know, like, Sam wasn't deaf in the game. But, because even the collaborative element, I don't remember if that was something that was ever really used in the game. But I also, like, this is kind of like, hey, this is like the game, but we're adding more context to it, adding even more depth to Henry and Sam's characters. Because once again, they were just people. Once again, even Bill was kind of the same way. Like, they weren't flushed out characters. But in the TV show, you get to kind of flush them out even more. And that's also sort of the thing I talked about last episode. I might not remember like every bit of extra dialogue. I might not remember some of the notes, or like maybe I missed some of the notes and stuff like that. Some of the extra flavor text for like world building purposes, because I don't remember. Once again, I don't remember this circumstance of like, oh yeah, this like group like overthrew Fedra. Maybe that was the background storyline in the game too, but I didn't remember that. I don't know if that's something they specifically made for the show or what. Obviously, Kathleen is an original character. Like, they wanted to kind of give a figurehead to spearhead this like resistance, to kind of be the face of it. So because they're just like faceless raiders. When you fight them in the game, they're nobody. That's why it's almost like, oh, Sam and Henry have a personal connection to this group, whereas in the game, it's just like, oh, they're just survivors that, oh, like, you killed some of our people, we're going to kill you now, but we were going to kill you in the first place and take everything that you have. So, either way. But picking up where the last episode left off, I love how we finally got to that. It was about, interesting enough, like about 16 minutes into the episode or something like that. And Sam's like, cool, we're all gonna be cool, we're gonna be fine, right? He's like, yeah, it's gonna be great. And then Sam's like, I don't know about that tone, bro. And Ellie's like, no, he just talks like that. He just sounds like an asshole. And she's like, come on, dude, calm down. So it's like, all right, sit up slowly, we're good. They shared their food. It's like, I can help you get out of town because we need to get out of town. Because even Joel was not too fan. It's like, wait, you're collaborators? It's like, I don't work with rats. It's like, so it is enough of a thing that happens. I mean, neighbor turning on neighbor is just a sad byproduct. They're like, everyone's trying to get by. And even later on, Joel even says the line of, I had no right to kind of call you out, being pissed at you for being a rat. Because he's like, because also knowing, having to look himself in the mirror of like, yes, I'm the guy who's done a lot of stuff I'm not proud of when it came to surviving in this world. You doing whatever. He's like, right, the justification for what you did, like, no one can, like, why can't they be a little more understanding? Like, everything you obviously did, you did for your brother, like, you know? But the biggest sin he committed for himself is like, he turned in Michael, Kathleen's brother, who was the head of the resistance. He's like, this is a good guy. Like, have you ever come across a good guy that you would follow into, follow to anywhere? And it's like, this guy was a good guy. And that's what hurts Henry the most. It's like, I turned in a guy who was trying to fight for us, and I sold him out. Like, regardless of my reasonings, he's like, I'm a bad guy because I did a bad thing. And you could sell that really hit with Joel, because he's a guy who's, that's the thing in this world, that the lines between good and bad is all about perspective, because Joel's perspective is like, no, you're not a bad guy because you did something to protect your brother. That's noble. But on Henry's side, it's like, no, Henry and Kathleen's side, it's like, no matter what my circumstances, my reasoning for, I still did something terrible. So I even love the whole thing of like, wow, your dad's kind of a bit of a pessimist. I'm not her dad. He's not my dad. And it's like, but I love that line from Henry being like, you may not be her father, but you were somebody's father. And Joel just kind of like ignored that. Just kind of was like, all right, let's go, when they were kind of waiting. And I do love that we do get that little homage to the game as well about people living underneath the city. That was something from the game as well. So it's just kind of a little bit of a thing, and obviously it sadly didn't work out for them because they ended up getting infected and, dying out regardless. I don't also remember that element from what Henry said either, and I don't think it was an element in the game either, but Henry says, like, did you notice anything special about the city? There's no infected, because Fedra basically drove them underground like 15 years ago. And it's like, yeah, this guy told me they cleared that out like 3 years ago. It's like, maybe it's like, I don't know if that guy might have thought that, or whether they were trying to keep up that perception of like, yeah, you need Fedra around because we're the ones keeping you safe. We went in there and cleared everything. I don't know if that was their way to kind of fool people into deciding to go down there just so they can get brutally murdered by the infected, or what. So, but also the beautiful element of Ellie and Sam hitting it off, because for one, it's like, right, this is the first time she's probably like since other elements of her story, she probably hasn't hung around another kid since, like, once again, those other elements of her story that I won't spoil until we get there. And I think that's why the Sam stuff hits her so hard, too, because, I mean, for one, it's like, right, it's probably almost like having a little sibling, being an only child, and the only probably other kids she hung around were probably anyone in the Fedra schools and stuff like that, so she latched onto it, Sam, too, because it's like, right, you get to have fun, she got to just be a kid. Where it's just like, she doesn't really have those opportunities because, like, you kind of have to grow up fast in this world in general. On the road with Joe, she had to grow up even faster, So, I thought that was such because that's something even from the game, like, Ellie and Sam, even in the game, really hit it off, too. I haven't loved the comic book thing, too, because that's a collectible in the game, if I remember correctly, collecting those comic books. And so I thought that was kind of I think that's kind of a neat little wink and nod Easter egg in that regard. I mean, because I think they bond over the comic books. I know they once again, I know Sam's thing was also toys, but I want to say they bonded over the comic books as well. So it might have just been that, but I do believe, once again, anyone that's more familiar does correct me in the comments down below, but I'm pretty sure that's probably also what she was supposed to lean into the fact this kind of wink and nod to like those being collectibles. Because she even says like, oh yeah, I have this one, and this one, and he ended up saying like, oh, I have this one, and this one. But it's like, yeah, because those are collectibles. So I thought that was kind of a nice way to kind of mold that into the story too. Once again, just a little thing like if you didn't know about that, you wouldn't know it. And I do love kind of the sort of juxtaposition from Henry's side of things, kind of like the guilt he does feel about it. It's not like he doesn't feel guilty, but he's trying to make sure he survives. That's why he's with Joel and Ellie, because he's like, right, you ended up surviving. Like, I've seen what you're able to do, so I'll lead the way through. You kind of get us through. And it's like, well, it's like, what about the infected? It's like, oh, what about the ones that can't see in the dark? And then Henry says, clickers? You guys ran into clickers and fought them and survived? I was like, well, 2. And I was like, interesting, because it wasn't until that moment I was like, right, they never dropped the name clickers in episode 2. The fact is that Henry's the first one to drop them. I wonder, because, if you're unfamiliar with The Walking Dead, they have different names, different groups. Like, some groups will call them the Walkers, others will call them just the Dead, others will call them Rotters. Like, everyone has, like, their different names. It makes sense, like, all across the place. Like, of course, like, different people have different names. So I wonder, are they not colloquially known as clickers? Did Henry, like, from Joel and Ellie's perspective, did he basically named them? Or is that just kind of implying like maybe in Kansas City they call them clickers? Maybe other places do too, but because like Joel never dropped the name. He didn't, you know, it's just kind of like the fact is that Henry's the one that said the word clicker. They never actually said it in episode 2. I didn't really, that didn't even click on my head because I was like, oh, I kept saying clicker because I know them as clickers, but they never actually said clickers. So I was like, that's interesting. But anyway, going back to it, the juxtaposition with Kathleen. And so the whole conversation of her right-hand guy was kind of almost like, can we really just let Henry go? And she's like, do we really have to go? He was like, do we have to really go after him now? She's like, Henry's not 7th on my list. Is he a 7th priority for you? And the guy was like, no. She's like, okay, then so we're not going to give him a chance to get away. And so she actually went to her home, the home she grew up in. And for her, she remembers her brother always being the person that protects her. It's like, right, this will be our safe space. No storms, no fire, or anything could ever get us in our safe space, in our little box if we're here and we're together. And for her brother was so kind. He was so loving. He was so protecting. And she's like, he was such a beautiful person. But for her, she's like, I'm not. I never was. And for her, she lost her rock and her foundation because her brother always made her feel safe. And so she's like, right, I know why Henry did what he did. My brother told me, well, either she learned from him or she just found out on her own, because she tells Henry later on, it's like, oh, I know why you did what you did. But for her, it doesn't, you know, and she was very callous with it later, being like, well, maybe it was his time to die. It's like, Jesus, Kathleen. Because it's almost hypocritical. Like, you want to chastise him for how much he wants to protect Sam, but here you are on this tirade, on this murder spree, trying to get to him because of what happened to you. But it's like, 2 wrongs don't make a right type of situation. But in this world, 2 wrongs might not make it right, but it's how you endure and survive. But for Kathleen, it's like, my brother wanted me to forgive him and asked me to do that. But she's like, what did forgiveness get him? Beaten to death, you know? So, but her right-hand guy was like, your brother was a great person. We all loved him. But he didn't get us where we are now. Who you are, like that ruthlessness in her is why we're here, why we have control of the city, why Fedra doesn't run us anymore. Once again, it is that double-edged sort of like, yeah, they're brutal in their approach towards Fedra, but when you hear like how Fedra treated them, turned them against each other, and that doesn't seem like it's just a Kansas City thing. It seems like it's everywhere thing just because of Joel's comment. It does seem like, yeah, like justified, understandable. I won't say fully justified, but I mean, if someone was like, they were justified in what they did, I wouldn't argue too much, just because I'm like, it's understandable. And if you want to say it was justified, I can't push back on that too much, just because it's like what that city went through for 20 years. Once again, selling out neighbor just to survive on your own, to get medicine to protect someone. That's why I thought, like I said, going back, why the fact that she threw out that specifically early in the scene, in the episode, I think that was kind of in reference specifically to Henry, but I'm sure other people sold their neighbors out for medicine as well. I was figuring that, I was like, are they going to have encounters in like the tunnels and stuff? Because obviously that's a whole, not just people living underground, but also like that's a whole gameplay sequence of like infected. I also think it's interesting too, they didn't include the whole, because there's a whole vehicle section in the game where like you're trying to run from a vehicle that's got like a machine gun on top of it and it like mows you down. I don't think I'm confused. I know there's the whole sequence. Well, that does it have guns? Yeah, it does. I was thinking of like that Uncharted 4 sequence where you're running from that like giant vehicle. But I'm pretty sure, I'm fairly certain I'm remembering that correctly. There was like a vehicle situation in The Last of Us 1 in that regard too. Cause I remember like, cause also the tunnel thing too, I remember too, because like, cause I was almost expecting it because I knew it happened in the game that, Sam and Henry and Joel and Ellie all get separated in different pairings. So, Joel is with Sam and Ellie is with Henry. if I remember correctly. And then there was like one point they were trying to get away from the vehicle, and Joel kind of falls off the ladder, and Henry doesn't go to help him, but Ellie's on top and she jumps back down because it's like, no, we're in this together. Like, if you're going to be on, I'm not going to leave you behind, Joel. So I was wondering if we get sequences like that. And luckily, Henry, and I think that's kind of a nice touch to make it so that Henry, like when Ellie does fall at one point in time, he's the one that rushes over to grab her. So, because it's like, right, you got our backs, I got yours. So I thought that was pretty dope. But obviously there was no like encounter in the tunnel system. Obviously the encounter happens later. But I also love that it's like, oh, we're in this neighborhood and someone's shooting off on them, which I'm like, oh man. Because I do love that they took that, because it's a section in the game, that very like area, and kind of how they remixed it. Because it's somewhat like that in the game, if I remember. They had to deal, obviously it's not, was it Fedra or was it the Raiders? It was the Raiders, wasn't it, that they were dealing with? Or am I conflating two different areas? I don't remember. Because I think it was the Raiders or whatever in the game that had like the armored vehicles, like, whatever. Maybe it was just straight up Fedra, but I could have sworn it was like, whatever the case may be, the whole section of like, it's one of the bigger sniping sections in the game where you're like, you can be holed up in the house and you can like be sniping them in the distance because you're helping out Ellie, Sam, and Henry. But either way, Joel went to like snuck around, and Ellie's like, no, you're going to get yourself killed. He's like, no, like it's dark. The guy already has terrible aim. I can do this. Do you trust me? And he goes around, and it's an old guy. He's like, please don't do this. He's like, just move the gun away. Give us an hour and just stay in here for an hour and we're good. He's like, just please don't. And Joel had no choice but to put the guy down. Sadly, the guy worked for Kathleen, so Kathleen was already on her way. Your boy doing the sniping business, like knocking people. And obviously Ellie and Henry running, like popping off like her shots as she's running. But I love that. I was like, all right, come on, Joel. You got it. You got this, Joel. And he headshots the person in the vehicle. But either way, Henry was going to turn himself over because it's like, Ryan, you want, just leave me, telling Ellie to run away with Henry. But then, shit pops off when the vehicle like goes into the ground and a whole bunch of stuff comes out. I'm like, oh, is it just going to be regular infected and clickers? And then we later on get the big boy. Because I completely forgot about it last episode. I didn't even talk about it because I completely forgot about, like, Kathleen and that guy came across it. Like, should we tell her? It's like, don't worry about it. It's like, they should have been worried because there's a whole bunch of infected that have been underground for 15 years. It was only a matter of time. And I think specifically that was probably the bloater, which I was like, yo, so this is the first time anyone's probably encountered bloaters. Now, the bloaters don't work the same way in this universe like they did in the game because Ellie made that thing about like, oh yeah, they spit spores at you. The spores isn't the thing in this adaptation, but that's a big thing that the bloaters would do in the game. They would spit spores at you. Plus, they are super strong. As you can see, it like toss people around like nothing. Like Kathleen's guy, that's almost how they kill you in the game. Like because they're like the clickers. It's a one-hit kill. Like it grabs you, you end up in a death sequence. Like there's no QTE, you're straight up dead. Like it grabs you, same thing with the clicker, unless you have a shiv that you can kill a clicker with. But in the case of the bloaters, like you have to put them down. But like, yeah, he grabbed the guy's head and ripped his head off. That's kind of how they kill you in the game. Because basically what happens is they'll grab onto your face and start ripping your face off. That's kind of how, well, because I think the clickers are straight up like biting to your neck and stuff like that. But I think specifically the bloaters, they'll grab into your face and start ripping the skin off your face. They cut away with the death animation in the game, so you'll get to see the full sequence of it. But I was like, oh, that was kind of like a little homage to that. So, but yeah, like that lucked out for Henry because all those infected. But because that's all going down, I'm like, oh, we're still going to get the ending, aren't we? Because jumping ahead a little bit, but we'll circle back a little bit. But jumping ahead, how it plays out for Sam and Henry is exactly how it plays out for them in the game. That's why people who remember the game a little bit, the moment they got introduced to Sam and Henry last episode, they were like, oh no, because everyone remembers where that story goes and how it plays out, and how it plays out in the show is exactly. It's not really a spoiler, but it's just compare and contrast is exactly how it played. Like it's a little different, but Sam getting infected and dying and Henry killing himself, exactly straight from the game. So, but, Yo, I also like love Ellie like having their back. It's like, yo, I got the knife, I'm out of ammo. She stabs the clicker that's got Henry, then also the one that's going after Sam, and luckily they got Joel backing them up, and then there's Kathleen, but before Kathleen could even do anything, even with everything happening, with all this fire, with this death and mayhem, her people getting murdered by this horde of infected, she's still trying to get her revenge, but she gets undone by an infected, ends up killing her, so... Also, that scene where that clicker got inside the vehicle of Ellie, I was like, and the way it was kind of bending, like contorting around you're like, ugh, that's unsettling. That contorting type of stuff you see in like horror stuff like that is always kind of unsettling. But yeah. Luckily, it all worked out in the end, and well, before we got to the ending, and you know, Joel was like, yeah, if you want to come with us, because Ellie's the one that said like, oh yeah, we're going to Wyoming. And Joel's looking at her like, why would you tell them that? It's like, you know, Wyoming's a big enough state that 2 more people can come. And she's like, oh, I know what he is. You're going to be like, no, Ellie, no. And she's like, and then I'm going to say it like 1,000 times until you finally give in, you know? But yeah, that's the really tragic thing. Cause like Henry was like, yeah, we'd like to go with you. And that back and forth with Sam, I thought was interesting with Ellie. Like, they're reading the comics and stuff. He was asking her if she was scared, and she's like, yeah, no. She's like, oh, I'm scared of scorpions. But then she was like, I'm scared of ending up alone. And for Sam, it's like, when you're infected, are you still there on the inside? Now, that's a departure from the game, because no one knew Sam was infected until after he had already turned. Like, even Ellie didn't know, because he kept it to himself. He was kind of upset. You could tell he was upset during the game. And then but the next, it fades to black, the next cutscene, he's infected. Like, he was already infected. He just didn't tell anybody. He didn't know how to really deal with it. But he confided in Ellie, and Ellie thinks okay, she thinks my blood is obviously the cure. So she slices over her hand and tries to touch his leg, thinking okay, maybe my blood will get in your system and maybe it'll cure you. But it doesn't work like that, sadly. And he ended up getting infected, and Joel tried to get to the gun first, but Henry did, and Henry's the one that put Sam down. And he's like, what did I do? And ended up killing himself in front of Ellie and Joel. And they were trying to talk him down, but there was no talking him down after that. It's and that's the sad thing. Everything you did to protect your brother, things still ended up this way. And it's just kind of yeah, I mean, I guess you could make the argument Kathleen still got what she wanted in the end. You know, because she was even yeah, I'm going to kill Ellie because Ellie was with the guy that killed Brian. Sam has to go because he's with you. So it's still the sad result. And that's the brutalness of this world. Once again, at least episode 4, it was sad, but there was some beauty and hopefulness to it. You know, but now this is just that's the bleakness of this world of yeah, not everything's going to work out, sadly. It's just yeah, nobody wins under these circumstances. So, and that was, you could tell, a real blow to Ellie, because she was just and she left a note saying, I'm sorry, which could be a combination of things. 1, I was supposed to stay awake with you and I fell asleep. 2, my blood should be the cure and I couldn't cure you, because I think for her, it's what's the point of me being I should have been able to save you. She hoped that she was able to save him. She thought she could, but the end result wasn't and then later on she's telling Joe where's Wes, and he points in the right direction, and she just walks ahead, and she's like, come on. She, once again, that aspect of having to grow up so fast, that the ugliness of all of this, losing someone that she was becoming friends with. It's she just, every time she turns around, she's losing more people. She's already gone through what she's gone through in the past. Then she lost Tess, someone she got close to. Henry and Sam, oh, we could have been friends. We were all hitting it off. And it's we could have traveled together. And it's just the lonely road that they have to walk together. And I think it is beautiful, because they did the same thing with Tess. At the beginning of episode 3, Joel is stacking rocks. He doesn't do that in the game. There is no actual burial for her. In either case, because it's right, Fedra's in the building, you don't have time to get her body and bury her in the game. And obviously, her body blew up in the show. In this case, they were able to actually give Sam and Henry a proper burial. And I do like that they added that in, because in the game, when Henry kills himself, the game, fades to black. And then, the next time you catch up with Joel, that's already been behind him. We don't know. I don't think they explain, how long it's been. So, where the next episode picks up with Joel and Ellie, that's going to be kind of where the game handles it. But the whole burying them thing doesn't happen. It's just kind of we kind of sadly just move on. So, And I don't know if Joel like reads that message from Ellie that says I'm sorry. I don't know if he reads that as being like, oh, he figured what she was trying to do. Either way, it's just, once again, like, you were a little hopeful, like, oh, maybe everything's going to work out. Once again, I wasn't hopeful because I was like, the moment it played out like that, I was like, oh God, he's infected. I was like, it's going to play out exactly the same, and it does, because it is the powerful yet brutalness of this world. I mean, even the whole Bill and Frank thing, despite being as beautiful as it is, and once again, you could have your complications with like the whole like feeling like they might kind of romanticize, unaliving yourself. Like, I get that to some extent. Like, I think you can have a nuanced conversation about that, but the fact is that it still kind of was a very sad story, and now we got, because I had to fight, because at least, like, I was blindsided by the Bill and Frank thing, so I'm like, all right, me being sad and being, like, choked up about it is, like, understandable. Like, I was blindsided because I wasn't expecting that storyline to be what it was, even though I kind of knew it. The Sarah thing, the test thing, I already knew the end results of those. I still had to here's another thing from the video game, the Sam and Henry thing, I still had to be like, nope, push it back. Pull it back. Don't let the tears out. Third thing I had to kind of fight back my sadness for, even though I already knew it was going to happen, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. I think I know where they end up next. I think they're a lot closer to Wyoming. I don't know if I'm assuming that's going to be like where we are, because I think they end up near don't they end up near a dam or something like that on their way before they end up meeting up with Tommy and them? Because we find out a little bit more of what Tommy's been up to in that time frame and kind of what he's kind of built for himself in that time. We'll kind of get to that later, but when they get to that. But I believe that's the next area they end up at after the Sam and Henry stuff. So we'll have to wait to see what ends up happening. But I'm excited to see. Well, aside, it feels like such a weird word to say under these morbid situations, but I'm interested to see where everything ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.